was another head-spinning week filled with controversies and developments in the 2024 presidential race. There are new dynamics at work, new states in play, and new fireworks flying. I caught up with University of Central Arkansas Associate Professor of Political Science, Dr. Heather Yates, to discuss. Exciting times to be a political scientist and a political journalist. So this is kind of Super Bowl fare for us. How unprecedented is what we are seeing in terms of Joe Biden exiting the race so late and all of the turmoil that that's created? Have you been surprised at kind of how smoothly it all went for the Democrats in terms of there wasn't any significant infighting?
Yeah, a couple of things on that is that this is highly unprecedented. We have not had a presidential election in modern history ever to swap out a candidate with 90 days to go in the general election. The last time we had a candidate, an incumbent president not run for re-election was 1968 with LBJ, Lyndon Johnson. So highly unprecedented and very surprising, especially with how the president also withdrew his candidacy. Nobody in his orbit knew. He issued this surprise memo on a Sunday afternoon and sent everybody reeling. And that was also very intentional because I think the president wanted to get ahead of the messaging, did not want any leaks, and he wanted to control that message. Then the follow-up question is how quickly the party apparatus then unified around Vice President Harris, which there was some pensive attitudes about this because heading into Biden withdrawing his name in the pressure to withdraw his candidacy, the party had already been kind of cannibalizing in on itself by applying this pressure. And so there had been weeks and weeks in buildup of this internal fracturing. And so the real hesitancy, the real anxiety was this going to translate then into a contested convention where there are going to be ambitious candidates that were going to come out to challenge Harris? And it really seemed to be that the pieces were put into place prior to Biden withdrawing his candidacy because in quick turnkey operation, Biden threw his endorsement to Harris and the party rank and file rallied, and she raised phenomenal record-breaking funds within the 72 hours. So that was also surprising, but for the party, if you're a Democrat, it was also very refreshing because it was a very high risk endeavor for about 2 weeks where the party apparatus, the party rank and file actually needed to gatekeep and keep that field open for Harris to gain that momentum because we're only 90 days out. It was a high risk because the Democrats didn't really have a lot of time to run a contested convention in any traditional sense.
Right. And very uncharacteristic of Democrats from my perspective and what I've seen over time. And they usually cannot organize without that type of internal fighting on some things. Let's talk about what some dynamics have changed in the race in terms of what you're seeing in the polling data nationally. And obviously we can drill down into some particular states. But I mean, the Democratic base has returned. There is definitely some enthusiasm among different segments of the population that were not there when it was a Biden-Trump matchup. And then, I mean, speak to as well if you see anything shifting on Trump's front, or is it still kind of status quo for him? But give me kind of what you're seeing in the polling numbers that you're looking at.
So in the polling numbers, they're still tight, comparatively speaking, with regard to specific groups. But the group that we see, the group of voters that we see the most dynamic shift with was actually Black men, because Donald Trump's campaign was making a strong appeal and making inroads with Black men. And we see after Harris takes the top of the ticket and really at the nominated convention a couple of weeks ago, when she steps in and accepts the nomination, and at that DNC stage, a lot of pontificators really take the stage to support and endorse Harris. That's where we see the most palpable shift in the polls. And we really see Black men kind of staying in the base and not defecting. And I think right now that is one of the most palpable pieces of the coalition that the Harris candidacy now has solidified and has made harder for the Trump-Vance campaign to make appeals to. To the question of the Trump-Vance campaign losing ground on that, they've really had a hard time recalibrating around this new message because they had their campaign tailored for the Biden-Trump matchup. And we have seen 3 weeks now of the campaign kind of flailing on their messaging and also losing ground to some of those Democratic coalitions that they were trying to eat into. And I think that's what I want to clarify is the most shift looks like the Democratic coalition coming back home to the base that were defecting under the Biden-Trump matchup. So I wanted to also make that clear.
Yeah, no, certainly. That's great points right there. All right, last question for you. What are some of the swing states that you're watching? Maybe give me a little rundown of what you're seeing in the polling. I think for some folks it's fairly obvious, but and there's some stuff that has definitely moved from solid, I wouldn't say solidly Trump, leaning Trump and away from Biden to much more of a toss-up, or even Harris with some small advantages in some of these swing states. What are the ones you're watching?
You're correct. So I'm watching the old Rust Belt / blue wall that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. That's your Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe Minnesota. Harris' campaign has targeted those states and she's closed the gap. We see in Pennsylvania, she's closed the gap to where Trump is only up 1 point. Wisconsin, Harris is now up 1 point. Michigan, Harris is up 2.2 points. And Wisconsin, Harris is up 1 point. So even though that's tight, she has closed the gap because right after that June debate, Biden lost a lot of ground in that. So that's really remarkable that she made that ground up. Another state to take a look at that we are seeing in the news and hearing is Arizona. Arizona, Harris has actually closed the gap there because Trump is only up 2 points. So Arizona could be in play, and Arizona's in play in 2020 as well. Yeah. But that was also a state that under the Biden-Trump matchup, that Arizona was squarely in Trump's column. And we have a few, Pennsylvania was squarely in Trump's column. And so she's been able to eat into his lead there. So I would just take a look at Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, and then, North Carolina, I do put on the bottom of this list. Trump has a sizable lead, but 70 days is a long days in politics, a long time in politics. So things could change there.
Yeah, I'm keeping Nevada on my list right now too.
Oh, yes, Nevada. Sorry. Yeah, that was also on my list too. Yeah, we need to put Nevada in there.
All right. I said last question, but now my really last question. How are things looking at this point in the race in 2024 compared to what you were seeing in the previous election cycles, maybe 2016? I'm not sure if 2020 is on your radar there, but just what do you see in the numbers in terms of this stage of the race?
Yeah, so where we're at this stage in the race, so on this day in 2016, Hillary Clinton was up in the polls by 5 points, about almost 6 points. And in 2020, by this same day, Biden was up almost 7 points at 6.9. And comparatively speaking, Harris on the Democratic side is only up 2 points. Okay. And so that indicates that this is going to be a tight race, even though that there's this injection of enthusiasm and a lot of voters are paying attention to it. We also don't want to get swept up in that wave of emotion and remind ourselves that this is also going to be close margins, and even in all those states that we just mentioned. So Harris is still down by at least 4 points comparatively where Biden was 4 years ago on the same day.